Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the National Police Association podcast. I have a guest with us today that I've been on Newsmax with, and he does more media than I do. And but he's also, boy, he's out there just doing some amazing things. He's a physician. We're going to talk about that. He is a colonel in the Air Force. We're going to talk about that. And he's also decided, as though he didn't have enough to do, to jump into the political arena, and he's running for lieutenant governor of North Carolina, and he's got some terrific opinions. And I want to start, Doc, by talking about your incredible book, because he's also an award-winning author. So Dr. McConkey, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So I want to talk first about your book, because I'm such a student of leadership. And I've read, like most of us, a million leadership books, right? And your book is the one of the most least narcissistic leadership books I've ever read. I'm not sure I'm putting that properly,
Oh,
but
thank you.
in your book, you don't talk about you. You talk about what others can do to improve their own leadership skills. First and foremost, what led you to writing your book?
So that be the weight behind the spear. That's my personal leadership ethos with, 23 years of military service and trenches of the emergency department. It's when you try to describe that title, working with the tip of the spear individuals as a medical director for special operations, combat search and rescue, you see what those individuals do, but you realize that it's the weight behind their spear that really gives them the power to do what they do. Their confidence. Everybody has somebody in their life that gave them the amazing confidence to do what they do. The best resource of any country is its people. So teachers, coaches, volunteers, families, and mentors. That's what sets America apart. That's what makes us so special. And that's the weight behind our spear.
I'm glad you brought up teachers, because teachers are kind of getting a bad rap right now. You were raised by a teacher. I was
Yeah.
raised by a teacher. And they are so incredibly important. And yet now, kind of what we see in the media is really just a radical, tiny
Ugh.
percentage of educators in this country. Talk about the importance of our educators when it comes to raising kids.
So, my wife is a teacher as well. And when you look at like the two most difficult jobs on planet Earth, teacher and law enforcement, all right, just brutal jobs. And the problem with teaching right now is that they've removed the ability for them to hold kids accountable. So they want these results, but you don't empower them to do anything to hold the kids accountable to get the results. So, on top of the kind of the woke, the DEI craziness that's been going on in public schools, you don't empower them anymore. My mom told me plenty of stories, and she's finally retired, so thankful to be retired. But the last 10 years of her career, she couldn't even fail a kid. These kids would not show up, do nothing for work, literally have like 0%, and she can't fail them. I mean, what type of message are you trying to send kids when you don't empower your teachers to do those basic things and hold those kids accountable? So it's a very, very difficult job.
I'm glad you said that, because my husband and I were talking about this yesterday. I said to him, boy, my mom would be rolling over in her grave if
Mm.
she saw the state of education now, and the state of teachers unions and things like that. And when you talk about the difficulty of that job, and you relate it to law enforcement, which, by the way, is one of the reasons why cops and teachers tend to marry each other. But we also, when you come from that kind of family, like you did, like I did, that service type family, it leads you in those directions, because education is really very much a service driven profession, as is the profession of law enforcement. And one of the things that we saw in the last 5 years is law enforcement officers, school resource officers, generally speaking,
Yeah.
were taken out of the education system. They were demonized, they were vilified. And that resource that a lot of educators had, that police officer in the school, was taken away. What are your thoughts on that as a political candidate about cops in schools?
You know, they had talked about doing that here. So I live in North Carolina. I'm outside of Raleigh, and one of the public school systems had talked about removing those school resource officers. We raised absolute hell, and and then I can't believe which of the school shootings happened about a week or two after that that really kind of put that to rest. But the importance of having that school resource um, cannot be overstated. You know, as someone, as an emergency physician, you know, I've worked with police officers my entire career. I've been an EMS medical director as well, fire, paramedics, law enforcement, special operations, SWAT teams, that types of thing. And they're just such difficult jobs. And, you know, I've personally saved several officers' lives. I remember some real specific cases in the emergency department. And that's always the challenge in the ER when you get like multi traumas or there'll be multiple gunshots and you've got the officer on one table and then you've got the perpetrator, you know, on the other table. It's always some unique situations. But yeah, those are the most difficult jobs and they need our support.
When you talk about police officers being injured, and thank you for what you've done for our profession, because again, police officer ambushes, attacks
Mm.
on law enforcement are up over 150% now. And even though our officer deaths are down, officer injuries, assaults, and ambushes are up. And a big part of that, the deaths being down, are thanks to ER docs like you. And and also thanks to the fact that we, the profession, started listening to your profession and learning how to do tactical medicine. We started
Yes.
really borrowing
Tactical
from
medicine, like TCCC, Tactical Combat Casualty Care. So I was just speaking at Salt and Light, a big conference, North Carolina Faith and Freedom Coalition, and ran into there was two firefighters and a police officer from Minneapolis. And the stories that they told were just blood curdling. I just those so when they had the George Floyd protests and they were burning Minneapolis to the ground. So there were at one point, this is direct from them, 47 fires going on in Minneapolis at one time. And anybody that responded, they were having rocks thrown at the vehicles, shot at. They couldn't even get to the fires because it was so dangerous. Law enforcement as well. And these are individuals that have dedicated their life to saving your life. You know, back the blue, back the thin blue line, thin red line. Like to attack those individuals, I didn't even understand the concept of these ambushes, but they literally will do that. They'll ambush the people responding to these emergency situations. It is the most insane thing I've ever heard of.
and we're seeing not just police officers ambush, but now firefighters as well. And
Paramedics.
as we saw in Idaho, and it's just it's extraordinary. Because cops always love to tease the firefighters. Everybody loves them. Everybody hates us. We're used to it. But now to see our brothers and sisters in the fire service
Oh,
getting shot at,
that
sometimes
was in
getting
that was in
murdered.
Coeur d'Alene, wasn't it?
Yes, and
Yeah,
it
I've
was
got
just
family there. That was a
extraordinary.
terrible story.
Yeah, and so we're learning now that one of the things that we have to do is we can't wait for the paramedics. We can't wait for the ambulance. We can't wait to get to the hospital. That we've got to learn to take care of ourselves. And that's a relatively new development, like you said, tactical medicine that we really borrowed from the military. In the late 70s, we had police officers getting shot with survivable wounds, but they would just lay down and die because we'd all kind of stand around and wait for the
Mhm.
cavalry to come. And we stopped doing that. I'm taking this back to your
Yeah.
book because one of the things you talk about in your book is resiliency.
Yeah.
That's a real theme that runs throughout the book. And that's something that law enforcement, again, is relative. We're always a little behind. And we really haven't talked a lot about resiliency until about the last 20 years talk about resiliency in a service profession.
Yeah, just that ability to adapt and overcome. And that's certainly something we teach a lot in the military. I taught to all the individuals under my command as a military commander, but just being able to think outside the box. And that's what Americans do best. So when you look at some military training, like the TTPs, the tactics and procedures, like that we have in the military, that's one of the things that always throws the Chinese and the Russians off, is because we have these policies and procedures but we don't follow them. So, because our ability to critically think, to get outside the box, that's what sets us apart. And when you look, it's very similar in law enforcement as well. There's, like for us, our non-commissioned officers, for the law enforcement, like the sergeants, the leadership out on the street, on the beat with those officers, thinking outside the box and being able to make decisions without, the Chinese and the Russians do not have an NCO corps. There's no non-commissioned officers. That's one of the reasons that they fail. And we saw that with the Ukraine invasion, just completely botched invasion of Ukraine. But those things are just critically important, that basic leadership. And then when you have that confidence in your leadership and those skills, that resiliency to be able to think outside the box and take care of things that otherwise would overwhelm you, that's a really important skill.
How important is patriotism? That love of country. I don't think in other countries, you mentioned Russia, China.
Yeah,
I,
they
I
you
don't
don't
see
you
that
don't see
love
that.
of country that we have,
I
right?
have lived overseas. I've lived in Australia. I've lived in New Zealand, spent a lot of time in Europe with the military as well. Got a lot of friends from all over the world. And that is the one thing they always comment on, is just America is so different. When I was in New Zealand the very first time, you see, we were down there in 2008, 2009. They held the Women's World Cup. I think it was like the Youth World Cup, like the U20 or something World Cup. And a lot of my friends from Rotorua, I was working at the hospital in Rotorua. We went to a game in Hamilton, and we watched the U.S. team play, and when they sang the Star Spangled Banner, it was just, they just kind of looked at me in awe, because I stood to attention. I was saluting the flag as a military member, and just they asked me questions about it, and they just like, man, your guys' patriotism. We don't, the rest of the world just doesn't have that. I mean, I still get teary eyed when I when I listen to the Star Spangled Banner a lot of times, because I just have so many memories from combat and those people that have sacrificed so much. And you just overseas, they don't quite understand that. So, I get lots of questions when I'm traveling around the world. Those are the things they want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we see that in law enforcement as well, where um, it, you know, people who hate this country, people who hate the government, they're not particularly going into law enforcement, but we have seen over the last 4 or 5 years how difficult it has been, especially in certain areas, to stand up for your country as well as stand up for your very often big blue city. Uh, it's a tough road
I
for
mean,
especially
it's got to
urban
be
cops.
difficult to recruit in law enforcement in a lot of these cities. I mean, you look at LA and some of these other really blue cities, man, it really has to be a calling. You have to be a very dedicated individual, because a lot of times you feel like that city leadership doesn't have your back.
I have to ask you because, here you are, great military career, colonel, ER doctor, award-winning author, family, right? You're a pretty busy guy. What made you get up one morning and say, I think I'll run for not, the school board, not city council. I think I'll run for lieutenant governor of my state. Walk me through that thought process.
Well, you see failed leadership and failed policies. So, COVID being kind of very, very recent in everyone's mind, but you saw, uh, was it Governor Cooper, who's now Josh Stein is our governor, and Rachel Hunt is the current lieutenant governor. That was a little three amigos there. They were involved in shutting down schools, shutting down churches, just burning businesses to the ground. And I just really disagree with those policies. And then I see the repercussions of that in my emergency department now. So that whole generation that they just basically sacrificed, this young North Carolinian and Americans, we have a huge mental health crisis. So in the ER, they're coming to me. So I see the anxiety, the depression, the suicides. 3 weeks ago, at a 14-year-old individual, they got a hold of a handgun and killed himself. My son is 14. This really strikes close to home. And then when you see that same, I call them the COVID generation. You take these 18 to 25-year-old kids that are now coming in the military, and as a military commander, the lack of resiliency skills and the inability to communicate. They can't look you in the eye. I mean, I have no idea how some of these kids are even get through basic training. That there's clearly a problem, and we need purpose-driven leadership, and we're not getting it at that level here in North Carolina. And after you've served in combat and you've watched people pay that ultimate sacrifice, that's what I think about every morning when I wake up. I feel super blessed. I've got a wife and a family, and I will do whatever it takes to make sure that they're successful, that North Carolina is successful, and we need better leadership in North Carolina. So that's why I'm running.
You talk about the mental health crisis, and that's something that really impacts American law enforcement. And we have lots of political leaders who say, let's replace cops with social workers. Tell me your thoughts on that.
So let's talk about Portland. All right. I worked there. I was with the 304th Rescue Squadron. And if you look at a perfect example of like a local government that just has no understanding whatsoever. So what they did is they decriminalized drugs. And then they started handing out the free needles to everybody. So their answer was, these are all just victims of the society. And, we don't need more police officers, with the crime and the homelessness and just the craziness going on in Portland that we're now seeing, them attacking the ICE facility. So let's just get a bunch of social workers and we'll just address mental health. Well, what was so funny is as they decriminalized everything, no jail, like cashless bail, all these types of soft on crime policies. Um, the very funny thing is cracked out homeless people don't make their appointments. Like it should be common sense. Like you talk to an emergency doctor that deals with mental health all day, every day. I could have told you that. So their answer was to get social workers and get them all mental health appointments, and we're just going to address the mental health issue, which it's a problem, clearly, but they don't show up for their appointments. And so it was just a complete and total disaster. So I still have colleagues that are there, some in the police force in the Portland area, and you just hear the stories now. It was completely foreseeable. It was an epic failure, and that city is struggling.
Yeah, that city, like so many others. And it's so ironic because Portland, I used to go there as a trainer, and we would film training videos with Portland PD and Beaverton PD with the
Yeah.
sheriff's department because those men and women, they were experts when it came to crowd control and dealing with subversive groups and Antifa and things like that. And it's so unfortunate to see what has happened now in
Oh,
this decade-long attack
yeah.
on the federal facilities there in Portland.
So their inaction and that failure of leadership at that state, at the state and the city level there in Portland, it's just descended to Lord of the Flies now. It's crazy. Yeah,
It is.
so
It's going to be the purge eventually.
oh my gosh, wow. Yeah, it's scary.
You know, when I was a very young cop in the early '80s, when we had mentally ill, homeless, very drug addicted people, things like that, we were able to take them to a state hospital, if you will. We had facilities where we could check them in for evaluation, and very often they would stay put for weeks, if not months, and that ended in the '80s. What are your thoughts now on dealing with this public mental health crisis that we have that includes drug addiction, alcoholism, other mental health issues combined with homelessness? What is the answer? Because I know this is something that you deal with as an ER doc, but you
Mhm.
will also deal with as lieutenant governor.
Well, I can tell you, I know all the law enforcement extremely well because on a daily basis, they're coming and hanging out with me, just dumping all kinds of homeless and social health issues and mental health issues. And then every once in a while, I have to beg and plead for one of them. If we actually can find somewhere to admit them, I have to beg one of the officers to come back and then drive the patient over there. So, you develop those relationships. Um, We need more mental health resources clearly as they shut down all of those facilities. It's across North Carolina as well. And we routinely have mental health patients that just sit with us for weeks, sometimes months. I think the record that I saw, there was a geriatric mental health patient that we had that, when I was a professor at Duke University, sat there for over 3 months in a hole, like the psychiatric hold in the back. So we actually had to write orders every day to get the patient out, get them to walk outside, get some sunlight exposure to, for vitamin D exposure and to prevent DVTs. Like if you weren't crazy before and you got locked in that hole for 3 months, you are clearly going to be crazy by the end of that. And we see that with adolescent mental health as well. And just most recently, the hospital that I'm at now, we had a resident that stayed with us for about 2 months. My last shift when I went on Saturday, he wasn't there anymore, and it was a little sad actually because we got to know him so well, his character, and they threw him a little party apparently, and yeah, so I found out Saturday they actually got placed into a facility. But you need more mental health resources, and I think that's almost universal across the nation.
And when we talk about that, more mental health resources, they have to be, um, well, first of all, it's expensive,
It
but
is.
secondly, they have to actually show some progress, right? I mean, I feel like we have so many people who are counselors and this and that, and they don't really accomplish much with their patients.
Yeah, it's got to be the right education level, the right experience level. Inpatient psychiatric facilities with psychiatrists and mental health practitioners. I think the case that everyone recognizes here, Irina Zarutska, the Ukrainian girl. It's a Friday night. She's just slaving away at a pizza joint, leaves her job on a Friday night, going home, and gets murdered right there on camera with everyone sitting around her by an individual that had been arrested 14 times. Clearly had some mental health issues as well. That individual had no business being on the street. Police are doing their job. They arrested the guy 14 times, and magistrate judges just kept kicking him out the door. And that's, my whole campaign is about accountability. When you remove people's accountability from their actions, that's where you see things uncouple and it just descends to chaos and Lord of the Flies. So you start holding these magistrate judges accountable for those types of actions, I guarantee you they're going to be holding on to those people.
That's one of the issues that we see. We hear a lot of talk about law enforcement officers. Oh, we got to get rid of qualified immunity and this and that. And yet, generally speaking, judges have absolute immunity. Prosecutors have absolute immunity. And so, like you said, there really is no accountability for lousy decision making, right?
Oh, and at the political level, Josh Stein, Roy Cooper. So Josh Stein was the attorney general. They're soft on crime policies, cashless bail, churning these people out with just these magistrate judge decisions that 14 times, 14 arrests. It's like, it's so hard to watch. And when you watch that on video and you see that young woman, she's just like bleeding out, and there's people sitting on the bus next to her. It's Had she got medical care, or anyone even just cared in the slightest, it's so hard to watch that. Absolutely brutal. And so that case has really galvanized all of North Carolina, a lot of the country. And so we do have a Republican run state House and Senate that have passed some laws, and they put so much pressure on Stein. He was going to veto it, but he did sign it in the end just to end some of these cashless bail policies and hold people accountable. It was so hard to watch.
Yeah, cashless bail has been a disaster for my native Illinois,
Mm.
for New York City, for Los Angeles. And one of the other problems we have, of course, is illegal alien criminals who either don't get appropriate sentences, appropriate punishments, or when they are done with whatever jail or prison time they've done, they get released back into the public again to re-offend.
Oh,
um
so
yeah, so talk about your thoughts on the illegal alien criminal problem that the current administration is trying to deal with.
Yeah, so the Biden administration, their policy was just an epic failure. Just starting off with the 10 million illegal immigrants they let into the country, like purposefully and intentionally. But during as soon as President Trump like took office and started changing those policies, you saw that change. And the one individual that was extradited, I believe, to El Salvador, I believe, and they're like, oh, they're a citizen, they're a citizen, and they ended up not being a citizen. Do you remember that one? There was even I think
Yeah.
the Maryland senator flew down there with a big publicity
Oh,
stunt.
yeah.
So that
So did my
individual,
congresswoman from
yeah,
Arizona.
oh,
She
ridiculous.
went
So
too.
that individual was caught in Kentucky or Tennessee trafficking human beings. And so they had it on tape. I watched the video, and you saw the sergeant with one of the younger, I think one of the state patrol officers, and he was talking to him. This is all on camera. He's like, "Hey, you understand what's going on here, right?" He's like, "Yeah." Every single one of them has a toothbrush in their back pocket. Their lips they're not saying a thing. These people are being trafficked. Clearly, this guy's trafficking people. The Biden DOJ got involved on that, and he was released. So it's really bizarre, like that thought process of just promoting lawlessness and not allowing our officers to just uphold the law. I mean, why have laws if you aren't going to follow them? But that type of mentality, those soft on crime policies, just disastrous democratic policy failures have led to multiple deaths. I mean, the young girl in Georgia, and I mean, it's not that they were just the crimes were committed. It's that they're repeat offenders. And it's still, they would not allow them to be extradited out of the country. So the Trump administration obviously has a much firmer stance on that. And then a lot of people, just, oh, well, these people are being, they're being deported out of here and they haven't done any other crimes. I'm like, listen, you entered the country illegally. That is a crime. It's not a victimless crime. You've got so many people that are doing it the right way, spending tons of time and money and waiting in line. So my wife, her brother married a French Cambodian girl, and she had a heck of a time. So they actually left the country before she physically had her green card, and for their wedding in France. And then had all kinds of issues getting back, but it was almost a year and a half, tons of money, doing everything legally the right way when everyone else is just jumping across the border, and then you give them free cell phones and cards and hotel rooms. I mean, you can't incentivize illegal behavior. In the emergency department, I call it don't feed the bears. All right. With opiates and narcotics, you just can't feed the bears. You see the difference. When there's an attending on that comes in, that's the candy man, they just magically show up. But for me, they don't show up. Like, why is that? Because I don't feed the bears. I don't incentivize illegal behavior. And then in doing so, there's tons of the people and the drug trafficking coming across the border. When you promote that type of illegal immigration, it's very dangerous. You empower all the drug cartels, and they're trafficking people in busloads and truckloads. And it's, small children, sexual exploitation. It's horrific. So all the downstream effects of effectively the Biden administration just straight up promoting illegal immigration hurt tens of thousands, if not millions of people.
And we're going to be dealing with this for, I think, years and years to come as we try to unwind all of that.
Oh,
I
10 million, 10 million in less
Yes,
than 4 years.
exactly. It's good. It's really it's extraordinary. And yet in every city in this nation and in every ER department, like you're dealing with every day, we're going to be dealing with this. Doc, I got about 50 more questions, but
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna have to let you go. So
Have
tell
to get
people,
another episode in.
I exactly. First of all, tell people where they can get the book, and then tell people where they can find you on social media, learn more about your candidacy, and frankly, just your extraordinary life.
Thank you. So weightbehindthespear.com, WEIGHT, weightbehindthespear.com. We've got the audiobook, ebook, and the paperback. It's at Barnes and Noble, Amazon, anywhere you can buy books. And for our campaign, we are always stronger together. If you go to strongernc.com, I'd love to have them join the team. On our social media, we've got Instagram, Josh McConkey MD. On X and Twitter, it's McConkey 007. And I've recently got a TikTok account and all of that as well. So yeah, if you just do a Google search, everything pretty much pops up.
I love it. Well, thanks for all that you're doing for this nation, and thanks for being with us today. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, you can visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.